the hardware that will power the next century of artificial intelligence, it isn't being built in some billion-dollar, hermetically sealed clean room in Silicon Valley.
Right, which is what everyone assumes.
Exactly. It's actually currently sitting in a pile of agricultural waste in Cartago, Costa Rica.
It's wild.
It is. And I want you to really think about our collective assumption regarding advanced technology right now, whether we're talking about quantum computing, next-generation AI servers, or, even neural implants.
We have this deeply ingrained expectation. I mean, we really think that to build the future, we have to completely isolate our technology from the natural world.
Yeah, we picture scientists in white hazmat suits, right? Working under fluorescent lights, just aggressively dominating materials at a molecular level.
It's the ultimate brute force mindset. We sort of lock ourselves in these sterilized, pressurized boxes, totally divorced from biology. We just assume human engineering has to start from an absolute blank slate to achieve perfection.
But the stack of research and field notes we are doing a deep dive into today, it just completely shatters that paradigm.
Oh, absolutely.
We are challenging the fundamental origin point of our most advanced tech here. Because this team in Costa Rica has figured out how to synthesize the materials for our most futuristic hardware using, dirt, the sun, and discarded branches from coffee plants.
Which just sounds like magic.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this, because going from a machete-cut branch on a coffee farm to a superconductor sounds like absolute science fiction. And we need to understand the physical mechanics of how this is even possible.
Yeah, so to understand the mechanism and really why anyone is looking at agricultural fields in Central America in the first place, we first have to look at the massive, glaring bottleneck facing the current tech industry.
Right.
Specifically, we have to talk about the failure of our supposed miracle material, synthetic graphene.
Right, and anyone following the tech space for the last decade knows graphene. I mean, on paper, it's the holy grail.
It's incredible on paper.
You've got a material that's exponentially stronger than steel, impossibly lightweight, and, its electrical conductivity is just off the charts. It should have revolutionized your smartphone and your laptop years ago.
The physical properties are extraordinary, sure, but the industry is completely paralyzed by how we actually manufacture it.
The CVD process, right?
Exactly. The standard method for high-quality synthetic graphene is chemical vapor deposition, or CVD. We're attempting to build this material atom by atom in those sterile labs you mentioned, and it is just a logistical nightmare.
Let's break down the actual chemistry of that CVD process for a second, because it's intense. The industry basically takes an industrial furnace, cranks the heat to extreme temperatures, and pumps in these petroleum or coal-derived gases.
Right. And the goal there is to force those carbon atoms to break apart and settle onto a metal substrate.
Which is almost always a solid plate of copper, right?
Usually copper, yeah. And they form a film that is literally one atom thick. That single atom thick layer is your graphene.
But getting it off the copper is the hard part.
Exactly. Because it's bonded to that copper plate at a molecular level through van der Waals forces, detaching it is where the entire process falls apart. You can't just peel an invisible single atom layer off a block of metal like a sticker.
You essentially have to destroy the metal. I was looking at the chemical reagents required for this step in our sources, and, the sheer violence of the chemistry is staggering.
It really is.
To dissolve that copper substrate and free the graphene, manufacturers have to submerge the whole thing in baths of iron chloride, highly concentrated acids, benzene, hydrazine.
Just incredibly harsh stuff.
Right. You are bathing this microscopic technological marvel in heavy, corrosive, highly toxic industrial solvents.
It is a process of sheer chemical aggression. The industry is generating astronomical volumes of hazardous liquid waste, all just to yield microscopic flakes of usable material.
So we're trying to build ultra-clean, 22nd century computing infrastructure using deeply inefficient, highly polluting 19th century industrial practices.
That's a great way to put it.
And as a listener, if you're wondering why quantum computers aren't sitting on your desk yet, this is a massive part of the reason. The financial cost of safely disposing of those toxic byproducts is huge.
Not to mention the massive carbon footprint of those furnaces. The technology fundamentally does not scale. You hit the absolute physical and financial limit of traditional tech manufacturing.
Because you can't build a ubiquitous global AI network if every single node requires gallons of toxic acid to produce.
Right. The industry basically hit a brick wall.
Which sets the perfect stage for the breakthrough out of Costa Rica. There's this product led by Nova Amazonia and a researcher named Martín Gutiérrez Guerrero.
Yeah, they looked at this toxic bottleneck and basically asked, well, what if we stop trying to forge this material from scratch?
And they developed something called 3D Bio-G, right? Biogenic 3D graphene.
Exactly. They are synthesizing high-grade graphene directly from the dry, pruned branches of coffee plants.
Just the discarded branches.
Yeah, these are the residual offshoots that farmers routinely cut away just to keep the main plant healthy. Usually they're just left to rot in the dirt or they get burned.
I'm looking at the physics of this.
Yeah.
And the leap is just wild. How do you physically transform a dry piece of coffee wood into a high-tech carbon superconductor without, melting it down in a vat of industrial acid?
Well, it relies on a highly controlled thermal mechanism called pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis.
Right. The team takes this residual coffee biomass and subjects it to extreme heat. But the critical factor is that they do this in an environment entirely devoid of oxygen.
Oh, because if you introduce oxygen to wood at extreme heat, you just get combustion.
Yeah, fire and ash, exactly.
Yeah.
But without oxygen, the wood cannot burn.
So what happens to it?
Instead, it undergoes intense thermal decomposition. The heat physically drives out all the non-carbon elements, the moisture, the volatile organic compounds, the hydrogen, the oxygen.
Yeah, vaporize.
Yeah, they just gas off. So what you are left with is the pure crystallized carbon skeleton of the plant.
But substituting heat for chemicals isn't the actual genius here, is it? It's what happens to the internal geometry of the wood during that phase transition.
That is the core of the breakthrough. Hardwoods, like coffee plants, have highly specific vascular structures built from lignin and cellulose.
Okay.
When those non-carbon elements bake away, the remaining carbon atoms naturally reorder themselves into conjugated hexagonal rings.
Wow.
The microscopic cellular walls of the coffee wood naturally form the exact atomic lattice required for graphene.
So they aren't destroying the plant to build a new material from the ground up. They are preserving the coffee plant's inherent three-dimensional microstructure.
They're just purifying what's already there.
Think about it like this, listeners.
Yeah.
The traditional tech industry has spent 2 decades trying to build a massive skyscraper by melting rocks in toxic acid, forging every single steel beam from scratch, and stacking them in a clean room.
Which is incredibly slow and expensive.
Slow, expensive, and filthy. And then this Costa Rican team looks out at a coffee plantation and realizes, hey, nature already built the entire skyscraper.
Right, the structural scaffold is already there.
They're just using localized heat to burn away the leaves and the drywall, essentially purifying the perfect architectural frame that evolution spent millions of years refining.
They isolate the structural perfection that already exists.
Okay, so we have this organically grown biogenic graphene. But what does the physical shape of a carbonized coffee branch actually do for computing? Like, why would a hardware developer prefer this over the lab-grown material?
Well, that brings us to the geometric constraint of traditional CVD graphene. When you bake synthetic graphene onto a flat copper plate, the resulting material is inherently two-dimensional.
It's just a completely flat sheet.
Right. And in the realm of quantum data and electron flow, geometry is destiny. A flat 2D surface severely restricts the pathways available for electrons to travel.
So if you picture a flat sheet of ice,
Yeah.
right, and you slide a puck across it, it moves incredibly fast, but it is restricted to a single plane.
Exactly.
If you have billions of data packets trying to move across that flat surface simultaneously, they're going to interfere with each other. You generate massive thermal bottlenecks.
But 3D Bio-G, because it inherits the cellular vascular structure of the coffee plant, is born as a tridimensional macromolecular network. It's essentially a conductive, nanometric, pure carbon sponge.
So traditional graphene is a single-lane highway in a flat desert, whereas 3D Bio-G is like a futuristic sci-fi megacity.
Yes.
It has infinite overlapping routes, ramps, and bridges for data to flow without bottlenecks.
It operates more like a dense, highly conductive subterranean root system. Electrons are not confined to a single flat plane. They have infinite pathways to flow through in all 3 dimensions simultaneously.
Which is exactly what the artificial intelligence industry is desperately hunting for right now.
Desperately.
Because the entire architecture of complex AI, these massive large language models that are currently reshaping the internet, it all relies on neural networks.
And to build hardware that supports a neural network efficiently, you need densely interconnected nodes.
You need a physical architecture that actually mimics the 3-dimensional synapses of the human brain. And the spatial density of this carbonized coffee plant perfectly replicates that biological distribution.
It allows for an unprecedented density of data processing without the thermal bottlenecks that currently plague massive AI server farms. It really is the ideal physical geometry for next-generation hardware.
I need to introduce a heavy dose of logistical reality here,
Go
though.
for it.
I look at this sci-fi concept of a tridimensional AI processor made from coffee wood, and then I look at how the real world operates. The biggest players in tech, these companies pushing trillion-dollar market caps, they're obsessed with supply chain control.
Oh, absolutely. They want everything purified and synthetic.
Right. They want deeply predictable materials. So are we seriously expecting the global tech infrastructure to tie its hardware production to the agricultural yield of Central America?
It sounds risky.
What happens to global AI production if there's a severe drought in Costa Rica? Or like an outbreak of coffee rust disease? It seems like a massive risk to base our most advanced technology on the weather.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, relying on the current chemical CVD model is the actual existential financial risk to the tech industry.
How so?
Because 3D Bio-G does not rely on the coffee bean yield. It relies on the pruned waste biomass. The global coffee industry spans dozens of countries across the equator and produces millions of tons of this specific structural waste annually.
Oh, so the redundancy is already built into the global agricultural system. The branches have to be cut regardless of whether the bean harvest is optimal?
Exactly. The biomass is staggering, and it regenerates every single crop cycle. This entirely solves the scalability crisis.
Because the tech industry doesn't have to invent a new global infrastructure or build massive new chemical processing plants.
Right. They tap into an existing agro-industry. It establishes a genuine circular economy. You take farmers who previously had to spend labor hours managing or burning agricultural waste, and you integrate them directly into the supply chain for global computing.
You essentially lift up the agricultural sector while entirely bypassing the heavy chemical industry.
Yeah.
And according to the projections in our sources, because this process is carbon neutral and avoids all the hazardous waste disposal fees, it could heavily slash the cost of advanced materials by 2030.
It completely democratizes access to the hardware. It renders the traditional, heavily polluting laboratory model financially obsolete.
Okay, that covers the computing side, the AI server farms. But if this 3D structure is powerful enough to mimic a neural network in a server, what happens when you introduce it to an actual biological neural network in the human brain?
This is the ultimate frontier.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when we pivot to neurotechnology and brain-computer interfaces, we are looking at a field that has relentlessly frustrated the deepest pockets on the planet. I mean, multi-billion-dollar projects like Neuralink have been trying to perfect human brain implants for years.
And they consistently collide with the exact same medical barrier. The grand challenge of neurotechnology isn't processing the digital signals from the brain. Our software and algorithms are actually quite capable of decoding neural activity.
Now, what's the issue?
The ultimate enemy isn't the software, it's the human immune system. Our biology is ruthlessly evolved to detect and neutralize foreign invaders.
Which brings us right back to those microscopic traces of toxic chemicals we talked about earlier.
Exactly. This is where the origins of synthetic graphene become a massive medical liability. Remember the aggressive chemical violence required to strip traditional graphene off those copper plates?
The benzene, the hydrazine, the iron chloride, yeah.
Right. No matter how meticulously a laboratory tries to wash, sanitize, and purify that synthetic mesh, at a microscopic level, trace amounts of those heavy metals and solvents remain trapped within the material.
Wow. And when a neurosurgeon places that synthetic implant into the incredibly delicate tissue of the human cerebral cortex, the body's security system immediately flags it.
Immediately.
Yeah.
The frontline defense cells of our immune system, the macrophages, they rush to the site of the implant to inspect the new object. They're basically biological custodians.
And when they interact with that synthetic graphene, they immediately detect the toxic chemical signature of those trapped manufacturing solvents.
It triggers immediate cytotoxicity. The macrophages sound the biological alarm and attempt to attack and consume the invader.
But macrophages are organic cells. They can't eat or dissolve an inorganic synthetic carbon mesh laced with heavy metals.
No, they can't. And when the macrophages realize they can't destroy the implant, the immune system initiates a backup protocol known as encapsulation. If the body cannot kill the threat, it walls it off. It aggressively builds a dense, thick layer of fibrous scar tissue completely surrounding the device.
And scar tissue is an incredibly effective electrical insulator. Within a matter of months, that dense biological wall completely suffocates the implant.
It blocks everything.
The electrodes are pushed away from the active neurons. The multi-million-dollar hardware is rendered totally blind and deaf. It can no longer read or transmit signals.
And the patient is left with a useless piece of hardware embedded in their cortex. It often requires another highly invasive surgery just to extract it. This biological rejection is the primary reason long-term brain implants have struggled to reach the general public.
So, mechanically, how does a carbonized coffee branch from Costa Rica bypass this biological warfare?
Well, the first layer of the solution is the inherent chemical purity of the 3D Bio-G process, because the material is synthesized using controlled heat and natural wood.
With absolutely zero copper plates or corrosive acids.
Exactly, there is no toxic signature. When the macrophages rush in, there are no trace heavy metals to trigger the cytotoxicity alarm.
But the immune system isn't just looking for toxins, right? It's still interacting with a foreign object.
Yeah.
A piece of carbonized wood doesn't inherently belong in the human brain. Why don't the macrophages still try to encapsulate it just based on its physical presence?
What's fascinating here is the precise biological role of a polymer called lignin. We mentioned lignin earlier. It's the organic polymer that gives plant cell walls their physical rigidity.
Right, it's what makes wood stiff.
Exactly. When the Costa Rican team carbonizes the coffee wood, the lignin undergoes that thermal decomposition. And the resulting 3D porous structure...
You mean the empty spaces left behind?
Yeah, the microscopic empty spaces left behind in the carbon lattice when the plant matter bakes away. That structure happens to shrink to a very specific nanoscale. And the diameter of those microscopic holes is an exact dimensional match to the human extracellular matrix.
Let's define the extracellular matrix for a second, because this is crucial. In the human brain, your neurons don't just float in empty space.
No, they don't.
They are supported by a complex three-dimensional hydrogel scaffolding made of proteins and carbohydrates. That scaffolding is the extracellular matrix.
Right.
Are you saying that the physical dimensions of the holes in this burned coffee plant are the exact same size and shape as the natural scaffolding of the human brain?
It is a profound geometric coincidence. The physical architecture of the carbonized plant perfectly mimics the native biological environment of human neural tissue.
Wow, so that acts as the ultimate biological camouflage. When the macrophages arrive to inspect the 3D Bio-G implant, they don't find toxins.
Nope.
And instead of feeling a smooth, alien synthetic surface, they feel the tridimensional porosity that precisely matches the brain's own native scaffolding.
It feels like native territory to them.
Yeah.
Because the geometry is so familiar to the body, the immune system just stands down. It accepts the implant as part of the natural biological structure.
And without the immune system building that suffocating wall of scar tissue, the living biology and the technology are free to interact.
The clinical observations of this are staggering. Because there is zero immune rejection, the living neurons in the cerebral cortex actually begin to grow and extend into the empty carbon pores of the coffee wood.
That is wild.
The living human tissue and the technological hardware physically fuse together into a single cohesive system.
The organic and the artificial become inextricably linked without the body ever realizing it is integrated with a machine. I mean, that is the absolute holy grail of neurotechnology. It promises safe, long-term stability for deep brain stimulation and neural reading.
And this is not a theoretical concept reserved for the 22nd century. The researchers project a 10-year horizon for this biocompatible technology to reach clinical maturity.
Just 10 years.
Just a decade. Within a single decade, this organically derived hardware could directly stabilize implants for over 50 million people globally.
That's incredible.
We are looking at reliable, permanent interfaces that could restore motor function for severe paralysis, bridge severed spinal cord nerves, and, deeply regulate the neurological misfires associated with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a pile of discarded dry branches on a coffee farm, and we traced the physical chemistry all the way to the absolute frontier of curing paralysis and physically merging human consciousness with artificial intelligence.
It demands a massive paradigm shift in how we approach engineering and progress as a species. The true path forward for our most complex technology is not found by attempting to dominate nature.
Right.
It does not come from forcing brute force chemical reactions in isolated pressurized laboratories.
It's entirely about humility. It's having the patience and the observational awareness to look closely at the natural world, to decode its mechanics, and to imitate the structural perfection that evolution has already spent hundreds of millions of years refining. we don't have to arrogantly invent the architecture of the future from a blank slate, because nature already engineered the blueprints.
The lead researcher on this project, Martín Gutiérrez Guerrero, he actually summarized this philosophy beautifully in his notes. Translated into English, he wrote, "Always aiming our gaze at the stars, but with our feet on the ground, listening to nature which has spent eons waiting to be heard."
We just have to be willing to actually listen, instead of trying to shout over it with industrial furnaces and toxic chemistry. It fundamentally changes how you look at the physical world around you.
It really does.
Think about those sterile, multi-billion-dollar clean rooms we pictured at the start of this deep dive. Scientists completely cut off from the outside environment, spending billions to force a technological miracle. And yet, the actual scalable miracle was literally growing in the dirt outside their complex.
Right under their noses.
Which leaves you with a deeply provocative question to carry with you today. If the microscopic cellular geometry of a simple coffee plant holds the key to safely merging the human brain with artificial intelligence,
What else is out there?
exactly. What other profound technological blueprints are sitting right now in your own backyard, disguised as common weeds or everyday leaves, just waiting for us to finally learn their architectural language?